I'm excited today to have Anthony Mink on the podcast. Anthony's an entrepreneur, a business strategist, and host of the Entitled to Nothing podcast. As the co-founder and CEO of Live Bearded, he's built an 8-figure e-commerce brand from the ground up, generating over $50 million in sales. With a proven track record of starting and selling multiple businesses across diverse industries, Anthony has a wealth of business experience and a genuine love for the game of business. Having experienced both the highs of multi-million-dollar successes and the lows of personal bankruptcy, Anthony's core belief is, my life is my fault, and I am entitled to nothing. This mindset of radical responsibility and personal accountability has empowered him to overcome intense adversity, to build a thriving business, and to live life on his terms. Anthony, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, man. It's so funny when you hear your quote bio being read, it kind of like makes me cringe a little bit, but it's exciting to be here and it's an honor, man. I really appreciate you having me.
Well, I've been looking forward to this. I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation.
Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
I would love to start with you sharing a bit of your story with our listeners, particularly around your journey and your development as a leader. How did you get started?
It's interesting. I think that I first learned the whole idea of leadership on the basketball court. I grew up in a small town in Oregon. It's called Sweet Home, believe it or not. I don't think there's a Sweet Home, Alabama, but there is a Sweet Home, Oregon. And it probably looks and feels about the way that you would expect. There was about 6,000 people there, a couple of stoplights, but I grew up out in the country, and basketball was really my first love. And that's where I had a really incredible coach through junior high and high school that really showed me leadership starts by leading from the front. It's by taking action, leading yourself first. And some of those lessons that I learned back then on the basketball court, it's amazing how they apply to life today. I remember my sophomore year, I made varsity, and I was like, every day I'm like, Coach, how am I doing? How am I doing? Where am I at? Like at first it was just, I wanted to make the team. And then me being the ambitious little guy I was like, I'm going to be a starter, And so every day, hey coach, how am I doing? What do I need to prove? What's going on? And one day he's like, Mink, enough is enough, man. Like, do you control how much I play you? I'm like, well, no, coach. He's like, do you have any control over what I decide to do? I'm like, no. He's like, what do you have control over? I'm like, how hard I play, coach. And he's like, then just go do that. And man, I remember it was like, holy shit, there's only one thing I have control over, and it's how I show up. And I think that's probably one of the most fundamental and one of the first leadership lessons I truly learned is like, you only control yourself. That's where that entitled to nothing radical responsibility comes from. And so I think to me, that's what being a leader means. I think being a leader starts by leading yourself first. And if you do that for long enough, you earn the privilege and the opportunity to then start to lead others. And that grows to the extent that your capacity to lead yourself grows. So that's kind of how I view it. But, I grew up, like I said, humble beginnings. My dad cut trees down for a living. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I didn't really have any idea that I was going to become a business leader or an entrepreneur. I just knew that I wanted to get out of Sweet Home and I wanted to see what, the world had in store. And through a lot of failure and a lot of fate, I found myself getting involved in the business community. And I've had, I feel like, multiple different careers, multiple different ups and downs and kind of twists and turns. But ultimately, from a leadership perspective, every single time I failed, every single time I had a success or a setback, I for whatever reason, had the ability to separate a little bit from it and analyze and reflect. And every time, the failure was my fault and the success was not maybe 100% my fault, but by the action that I took, by the responsibility, by the decisions that I made. And I just developed this some might say ruthless perspective of like, bro, your life is your fucking fault. And to me, that's like true leadership. True leadership is taking ownership, taking accountability, and then taking action.
You know, a mentor of mine says that you have to learn to autopsy success the same way you autopsy failure. Because if you don't know why it's working when it's working, you won't know how to fix it when it breaks. And I've always remembered that. It sounds like that's how you operate. You're evaluating all the time what's working, what's not, and why in both cases. Would that be accurate?
I think it is, you know, and this is, we all have different gifts that we experience or create through different times or given, you know, maybe from a spiritual sense. And I'll tell you a story. When I was 4 or 5 years old, so my dad was a really abusive alcoholic. And I have this very vivid memory. I don't know exactly how old I was. I was probably 4 or 5, but I went into the kitchen to get some food. My dad came in, my mom came in, they were screaming, cussing, yelling. And I got scared. And I remember I closed the fridge and I kind of curled up in the corner and I was like scared. And my mom saw me as a mother. Her awareness went to me. She came over, she picked me up and she took me into my bedroom. And I just remember we were in the bed. She was kind of holding me and I was crying and she was crying. And she said, Anthony, promise me 2 things. Promise me you'll never treat women the way your dad treats me. And promise me you'll never act the way that he acts. So little baby Anthony is like, okay, mom, I promise. And in that moment, my mom gave me one of the greatest gifts because I started asking the question, why? Why does my dad act this way? Why does he say this? Why does he do that? And what must I not do because I promised not to be like him? And it created a situational awareness and an ability to reflect on my life that has served me very, very well. And so my whole life, I was like, why does this person do that? And why did they say this? And why does that happen? And then ultimately that turned into, why do we do what we do? And that's where the foundation of all of my marketing success came from. My leadership capacity, my business success came from this idea of asking the question why, and then really seeking to understand it. So you're spot on by saying, I think it is in our moments of reflection, both of the success and the failure, that the greatest lessons are given to us. And I think we would both agree that we typically learn a lot more from failure than we do from success. That's just because there's pain and failure, and that drives us in a different way than the pleasure or the excitement of success. But by reflecting both of them, I think it's critical, because I think actually the worst thing that can happen is you could be really successful and then not understand exactly what you did. That's almost that to me, that's worse than failing, because now you don't have something that's repeatable.
That's right.
So, you know, I think that Socrates said a life unexamined is not worth living. And I think
that's right.
All of the lessons that let me say this, like you said, personal bankruptcy. I've been hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt multiple times from failed businesses and paying a lot of dumb tax, let's say. And the only way I've been able to turn all of those failures into successes is because I analyzed and I reflected and I took responsibility for my part, my mistakes, my bad decisions in there. And then I was able to turn failures into lessons. So probably the biggest leadership lesson I've learned by paying a lot of dumb tax and making a lot of mistakes is the ability to reflect on both good and bad results and extract lessons. That's ultimately what makes us stronger and smarter for the next swing at the plate, if you will.
You know, I'm glad you shared that. And I appreciate the transparency, because I think a lot of people who look at you and look at your presence online, they're looking at your highlight reel. And so often we can look at somebody else's highlight reel and we can extrapolate ideas like, oh, well, yeah, but Anthony's never had to deal with what I deal with. He's never struggled like I struggle. His journey's just been up and to the right. If somebody's sitting across from you and they say something like that, what's your response?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. What is the response? I think for me, I would just be vulnerable and share some of the mistakes that I made. Like, this is maybe similar but different. One time I had someone so my main company is called Live Bearded, and we sell beard care products and men's care products to a bunch of guys. And I had one of our customers reach out to me personally, And he's like, hey, Anthony, my wife and I were talking about you and your company, and we had a question. We have this belief that someone like you that creates this company and has the, quote, success comes from a very specific background where your parents taught you or they helped you get started or all of these things. And he was like, both of our parents were addicts and we grew up in a lot of abuse. And I wanted to ask you, what was your childhood like? Like, what did you have a lot of support? And I was like,
Wow.
man, like, I'm really excited to tell you, like, your belief is bullshit. And I'm a living example of that. And so for me, I think that the vulnerability of our failures is one of the most powerful things we can share as leaders, because if you lead yourself and others well enough, you will develop some success and create some accolades. And then that makes people think that there is a gap between where you are and where they can be.
Yes.
And the gap can be closed metaphorically and in the belief, in our individual belief, by simply understanding the journey of someone. And there's been many times in my life where mentors that I looked up to, I never heard them talk about the failures or the hard times or the struggle. And it made me feel like there was something wrong with me. Like, fuck, man, why is this so hard for me? Or why am I struggling with this so much? And then I came across a couple of entrepreneurs that I really admire. And one of the reasons why I really admire them is because they were so vulnerable about their insecurities and their failures, even though they run hundreds of millions and billion-dollar companies as founders. They're like, man, I feel like I haven't even gotten started yet. Like, I feel like I've not created anything valuable. And I'm like, okay, if you're thinking that and I'm thinking that, then maybe this is just the mindset of an achiever. Maybe the mindset of the achiever is, it doesn't matter. And I actually kind of languaged it for myself as the achiever's curse. And what I think the achiever's curse is we don't know how far we can go until we've gone farther than we originally thought we might be able to.
Yeah.
And the farther you go, the farther you realize you can go. And so you're always expanding your belief of what's possible. And what ends up happening is you feel like you're farther away than where you want to be. And so there's this gap. And we tend to identify with that gap more than we identify with how far we've already come. And so for me, it wasn't until I heard the vulnerability of other entrepreneurs that were so much farther along than me that I started to feel like there wasn't anything wrong and that this was just part of the process. And so if I was talking to someone, if someone asked me that question, I would say, the greater the failure, the greater the triumph. I would explain some of my experiences, my bankruptcies, my losses, my failures. And then I would say that all of those are happening for us so that we can develop the strength to go farther.
That is so well said. In building your business, I would imagine that there have been people around you who were cheering you on. And I would imagine there were people around you who were not. Who maybe said, you're shooting too high. You can't get there. First, has that been your experience? And second, how do you determine who is going to be in your circle? How do you determine who is going to be the voices that you listen to in your life?
Man, that question is so powerful. And I think arguably one of the most important questions in an entrepreneur or a leader, a man, woman, if we want to create something of our lives, the company that we keep, I think, is one of the biggest factors in that. And so sitting down and being very intentional about it. It's very interesting you asked the question because there hasn't been a lot of people that have told me that I can't do what I want to do. And the reason why that is very simple. Growing up, my dad told me how I was terrible at everything and I would never be good enough to do anything that I wanted to do. And I remember when I went bankrupt for the first time, my dad called me a miserable fucking failure and told me how terrible I was. And, oh, you think you're this big shot entrepreneur. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. Da, 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 da. And so because the one person that's supposed to be my confidant, my support system, my father, told me that I would never be able to do the things that I wanted to do, I never told anybody what I wanted. I never had the courage to proclaim, this is what I'm going to create. I just worked very, very hard in the quiet, in the background. So growing up early on, I had a lot of people telling me that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. You're not going to be good enough to do that. You're not going to be good enough to do this. The loudest voice was my dad. And that actually, you know what, brother, it's crazy because I've never actually thought about this, but I stopped telling people what my goals and dreams were simply because I didn't want anybody to have the power to tell me it wasn't possible like my dad did. And so I stopped calling my shot. You know, the famous Babe Ruth, like, call your call.
Yeah.
I didn't experience that, but I did experience the loneliness in some ways of not having someone to celebrate with at times. The first 7-8 years of my entrepreneurial journey, I did all solo. I just was by myself doing my thing. And so, you know, the wins that I would have, they would be shared with a very close group of people. And to answer the second question, which is like, who do you decide who you want to be with? I think it changes over time. In the beginning, you just hang out with people that have a shared value or shared hobbies and interests. And that's kind of where it started. And then I developed a core group of guys and friends. And as I became more involved in business and I started to have more and more success, and then your habits and your behaviors and how you spend your time starts to change, a lot of those previous or past relationships, they no longer become congruent. And so I would say the first thing is, today, I have to have a value and a vision alignment with someone. We don't have to value the exact same things in all areas of our life, but we need to have some core tenets that we really strive to live our life by. I'm a very principled person. So I'm only going to spend and invest time in someone that has the same principled stance. You know, like, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to operate with honor and integrity. We're going to work our fucking asses off. One big one for me is I will only really develop deep relationships with someone that naturally wants to celebrate my wins more than I do.
Yes.
You know, if you've ever had a friend like that you go out with to dinner or a show, or you go to the gym, you get a workout, whatever, and they're just like, you know, you're giving them an update and they're like, wait, what? You did what? Dude, that's amazing. I love that for you. Like, high-fiving, like, you know, there's certain really good friendships that I have where, you know, we'll do a product launch and have a big day. Like for our Black Friday sale, we did $530,000 in sales on the day.
Wow.
And that was, you know, $500,000 in a day. Like, that blew my mind. My parents made $12,000 my entire senior year, you know? So like the contrast, and I took a screenshot, sent it to a couple of my best guy friends. Dude, this is crazy. Check this out. They're celebrating, they're rooting me on. They're telling me how incredible I am. So I think part of it is shared vision. This is the way that I want to live my life. And this is the type of way that I'm going to conduct myself that overlaps with shared values. So those are kind of the close confidants that I have. And then in terms of advisors, I only seek advice from people that have the type of results in their life that I want.
Yes.
So I'm going to take relationship advice from someone who's got a 35-year marriage and they're more passionate and intimate today than they've ever been. I'm not going to take it from my buddy who's single. I'm going to take business advice.
Good plan.
I'm going to take business advice from my mentor who's built and scaled and sold a 9-figure company in a similar industry. So he knows the road ahead. So I would say it's kind of those two things. Like, if we're just going to be best friends or confidants, if we're going to really celebrate and live life together, then values and vision and be in alignment there. If you're going to be a mentor or an advisor, if I'm going to seek your counsel, you have to be somewhere in an area of your life that I admire and that I want to be.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Truly, you know, in my work as an executive coach, I tell my clients, you know, no one's going to cheer harder for you than I am. And no one's going to be more in your corner than I am. And what troubles me so often is when I talk to somebody who tells me that I'm really the person in their corner, one of the only ones, because they don't have anybody else in their world who understands what they're dealing with. They haven't yet discovered the power of community and the power of other people who are encouraging you. You know, Truett Cathy, who started Chick-fil-A, was famous for saying, you want to know how to know if somebody needs encouragement? If they're breathing. That's how you know. And I love that. I mean, I think that's so true. And you know what encouragement costs us? It costs us nothing. And yet, it's astounding to me how seldom people receive it, particularly entrepreneurs. And I wish I could say your story was unique or rare. I'm not sure it is. You know, and I love that you have now begun to craft a life, a business, and a podcast. Through your podcast, you're able to convey a lot of what you've learned, share that, and be a conduit of those lessons, and dare I say it, that encouragement to other people on their journey. I just love that, man.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. And it is so interesting because it's very hard for anybody who's not an entrepreneur to understand the experience of what it is.
100%.
There's, you know, it's like, there's this quote from Elon that I really love. And he's like, you know, entrepreneurship is kind of like chewing on glass while you stare into the abyss. And he's like,
good.
if you are the founder, CEO, you know, co-founder, whatever, you get people hand deliver the shittiest problems to you that no one else can solve. And it's your responsibility to do that. And then you carry the weight of the organization, of all the problems, the financial, the blah, 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 you know, on down the list. And the people that now like, and also it's like the longer that you play the game, the more that you experience the waves of the game.
Yes.
And the harder it is to like really connect at a very deep level with someone who isn't also in that game to some degree. I have a really good friend named Joe Polish from Genius Network. He's been a big mentor of mine, and he's the first person that I ever heard say this, but he said entrepreneurship is one of the loneliest roads that you can walk. And that's why it's so critical to get around other entrepreneurs who you can have some of that shared experience with and really feel seen, heard, and understood.
So true. So tell me about Live Bearded. Like, where did the idea for this come from?
Yeah, it's a great question. So 2009, I was going through bankruptcy and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I sat down, I was broke. I had no money. I was like just destitute in the sense of like, I'm a 23, 24-year-old kid and I got no idea what I want to do in the world. And so I sat down and I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. What do I want to do? I have no fucking clue. I got no experience. I got no contrast for what I want to do. And then I asked myself, maybe the best question at the time that I could have ever asked myself, what don't I want?
Oh, that's excellent.
Oh, I have some answers to this. And so I started writing. I don't want to do this. I don't want to answer to anybody. I don't want someone to tell me what I have to do, when I have to do it. And basically I wrote the manifesto for every fucking entrepreneur that was like, fuck the man, I'm going to do my own thing. But the key for me was I want to have time and locational freedom. I'm like, how do I create that? And at the time, you know, social media was just kind of becoming a thing. Facebook was really coming online. And I was like, if I could learn to make money on this crazy thing called the internet, ideally, or potentially I could work when I want, where I want. And I was like, man, if I could unlock that, I don't even care about making a bunch of money or anything else. Like, and I had this dream of like, I'm going to move to a foreign country and just like live on a beach somewhere. And it's funny now, you know, digital nomads and this whole thing is like super popular. In 2009, there was no such thing. And so I proudly proclaim now that I was one of the very first digital nomads. But I got into affiliate marketing, and it took me about 18 months to learn how to make enough money online to quit my job. And then I spent about 5 years just doing affiliate marketing. And what I was doing was learning the skills, the craft of writing paid ads, running paid ads, getting good at social media, email marketing. Like I was developing my skill set. And so I did that for 5 years and got to the point where I was, you know, $1 million affiliate. I was making a bunch of money. And then I took all of that and I invested it into a supplement nutrition company. I had sold a couple businesses. I had about $500,000 in cash. And I was like, this is my business. I'm going all in. I'm going to build my own thing. And 9 months later, I had about 50 grand left, totally lost it all, and found myself being like, how the fuck did I fuck up this bad?
Wow.
And it's probably the lowest point in my entrepreneurial career because I had a personal bankruptcy. Then I made a bunch of money, and then I made it, and I had the freedom and the success and then the personal feelings of significance. And then I risked it all on this one great idea and basically mismanaged and had realized that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. And I didn't really know what I was doing. And I lost it all. And so I had to start over. And at that exact moment in time, one of my best friends, my co-founder with Live Bearded. Now imagine this, I'm at my lowest point. I have no idea how I'm going to turn it around. I feel completely like I'm a loser and a failure. And my buddy Spencer's like, hey bro, I'd really love to learn how to make money online. Like, can you teach me? I'm like, me? You want me to teach you? And he didn't know necessarily the depths of what I was going through at the time. But we started engaging in this conversation of what it was like to make money online. It was No Shave November 2015, and he was growing out a beard for the first time. And all these dudes kept commenting on it. He had this like good handlebar mustache, and he's like, man, everywhere I go, guys are like coming up to me saying, great beard, brother. Like, your beard looks sick, man. Your handlebar's amazing. And he's like, I've never in my life got compliments like this from other dudes. And he's like, I think this beard thing is becoming really popular. Have you ever thought about maybe doing marketing or selling some beard stuff? And I was like, I had stubble. I'm like, what's a beard oil? Like, I don't have any idea. But I had the marketing acumen. So I put together a quick sales funnel, put some things together. I ordered 500 wooden combs on Alibaba.
Wow.
I paid a designer $500 to create a logo. They stamped the logo on the combs and they ended up in my kitchen. And around the first of the year, January 2016, I was like, all right, let me see if I can sell any of these things. Put together some Facebook ads and I sold all 500 combs in about a day and a half.
Wow.
And the engagement rate on the ads was higher than anything I had seen in any of my previous affiliate marketing. And I looked at Spence and I said, shit, bro, I guess we got to figure out how to send out 500 combs. Still to this day, we make fun of, we like joke about licking and sticking because there's pictures of us in the freaking living room, licking and sticking envelopes, sending out these first 500 combs. And me being the marketer and ambitious guy I'm like, well, shit, if we sold 500, let's order 5,000 and see what happens. And so we went through this testing process. To make a long story short, we ordered 5,000. We sold them over the course of a few months, did some market research. The thing that I would say that was the smartest thing we did is we created a private Facebook group. Again, early 2016. Anybody who bought from us as part of like the post-purchase email sequence, we invited them to join. And Spencer had no marketing experience. So I was like, you have one job. I said, read this article from Kevin Kelly called 1,000 True Fans and understand how we can turn these people into raving fans. And so he was the spokesperson and the product expert and the community ambassador. And for probably 6 months, he connected individually with every single customer that came into that group. We asked them, why did you grow your beard? What do you like about the products? What do you not like? What products do you want? What products would you use? Would you try this? Would you try that? Real-time customer feedback in a private Facebook group with a couple thousand men. That led to us developing all of our own products, launching the website in the end of 2016, building out our product line, and the rest, I guess they say, is history. You know, we've done over 50 million in sales, you know, have a really incredible company. And it started from this idea of a really good friend coming to me and saying, hey man, how could we work together and do something online? And what became the whole ethos of Live Bearded kind of grew out of that idea of, well, Spence and I have been friends for 10 years at this point. What if every customer that we did business with, we treated as if we would treat my friend of 10 years? Like, how do we make everything about brotherhood? And that's why we had that one-to-one connection. That's why we wanted to get their feedback. It was never about how do I sell as much beard shit and make as much money as possible. Obviously, we had a profit motive, but we both intuitively understood that profit came on the other side of relationship.
So
and
good.
If we could focus on the relationship first, the rest of it would take care of itself.
I really hope everybody listening is taking notes because you just dropped so much wisdom there, Anthony.
Thank
so
you.
much value. Let me ask you this. So, you have to lead at a higher level today than you did 5 years ago. Your team, your clients, everybody is looking to you and your co-founder to lead at a higher level. That same thing is going to be true 5 years from now. You're going to have to lead at an even higher level, and they're going to ask and demand even more of you. How do you stay on top of your game? How do you level up with the new leadership skills that your business and your team and your clients are going to need you to have?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the things I think one of the most interesting lessons to learn in business is what you're talking about. At early on, I thought, man, once we get this new product live, or once this new website is done, or once we have this new marketing initiative out there, like everything is going to be different. Everything is going to change. Like we're going to hit the next level. And you realize that never goes away. It's like at every new level of growth, there's new opportunity, but there's a greater need required by the leader.
Yes.
There's a greater capacity that is demanded. And so
That's right.
I think the short answer is you just have to commit to constant and never-ending improvement. We have this kind of better everyday ethos built into the way that we approach things, both at Live Bearded and then in my personal life. I think my model of the world is education first, that then creates opportunity for skill, and then you can turn that skill into success and experience. So I think the short answer, maybe it's a little bit cliche, but it's like, I'm ruthless about education. I'm always investing into mentorship programs, into advisors. I've spent easily north of $500,000 of my own money on coaching, courses, conferences. I hired Tony Robbins and worked with him for a year in his highest level coaching program. I did a private coaching with Patrick Bet-David I've got an advisor that I'm paying a substantial amount of money on a monthly basis to help guide us to the next level. So the truth is, what I've learned is I never have a how problem. I always have a who problem. And so the way that I continue to elevate my capacity is by investing into myself and putting myself in proximity and in relationship with people that are farther ahead than me that can help me elevate to the next level. So much wisdom there. Yeah.
As you have continued in your path as a constant learner, which is obvious, anybody who spends more than 2 minutes with you, like you're constantly learning. Is there a book that has made a tremendous difference in your journey that you would recommend to the leaders who are listening?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of them for sure. I think most of my reading, it falls into two categories. It's more around like the personal development side and then the business side. And I mean, so much of business is like the application or it's personal development in action, if you will. I think one of the best books I've ever read is As a Man Thinketh.
Yes.
Super old school book written in the early 90s, but it's where I kind of developed that fundamental philosophy of my life is my fault. One of my favorite quotes from there is like, what is it? Man is made or unmade by himself. Yes. So there's these really beautiful thoughts, but As a Man Thinketh, everyone has to read it. The Four Agreements, I think everyone should read it. The Power of Awareness, all about how the way that we create the future that we want is by assuming the feeling of that in desire already being created. We have to live out as if it's already a present fact. So some of these very psychological, mindset-driven things, those have been very, very critical to me. One of my favorite business books of all time is The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. If you don't know who Keith Cunningham is, he's actually the guy that Rich Dad, Poor Dad is kind of based on. In this idea of he's the quote rich dad, but he's an incredible entrepreneur. That one is super helpful. That one's really helped me. The book Unreasonable Hospitality.
So good. Will Guidara.
Yeah. From a culture standpoint has been incredible. I really love Alex Hormozy. I've read both of his books from a tactical marketing perspective, but I mean, there's so many good ones. Those are a couple that have really helped me on my journey.
That's phenomenal. Anthony, I could talk to you for another hour. There's just so much insight and wisdom. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing it so freely. today with me and with our listeners. I know people are going to want to stay connected to you and continue to learn from you. What is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, man, first off, I just really appreciate the opportunity to come on and share. And it's amazing to see what you've accomplished with your podcast, and your capacity as an executive coach and mentor, I think, is really incredible. And that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you today. So Anthony Mink, at Anthony Mink on Instagram, anthonymink.com. I just got into this crazy world of putting out content in the last year and a half or so. And I'm having a lot of fun with it, but really I'm doing it just because I want to share parts of my experience and hope that they can serve and inspire others on theirs. So if any part of this resonated, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, or, reach out to me directly through my website. livebearded.com is the business as well. You can reach out to us there. I'm super accessible and would love to help anyone on the journey. If anything that I have shared has touched a nerve or inspired you, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to help any way I can.
I love that. We'll have all those links in the show notes. Anthony, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach to help you intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.